Win big in 2025 with Team Sync from RotoBaller. Import your fantasy teams and sync your leagues. Get customized tools and tailored advice for your specific rosters and scoring settings, including live recommendations from the live draft assistant, free agent finder, and lineup optimizer. Sync an unlimited amount of NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL fantasy teams from all of the major fantasy platforms. Get a discount for any premium pass using my promo code Knuckler. Just visit rotoballer.com/radio and start rotoballing like a boss. This podcast is also brought to you by Parlay Play Fantasy Sports. Use my referral code RotoBrady. Get that sweet, sweet deposit bonus. They're coming to new states all the time, giving out boosts and bonuses, slashing lines, getting those player prop DFS contests. It's a real fun platform over there. And what is up, everybody? This is Brady Grove bringing you another interlude episode of RotoBallers official MMA podcast. Tap that. And folks, we got UFC 319 this week, and the Contender Series is going on as we speak. For my picks on all that stuff and more, follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady. Follow the podcast at Tap That MMA Podcast on YouTube and Spotify. And with me tonight, all right, this guy has already you've already smashed through the average amount of countries that someone ends up playing in their professional football careers. He has seen it all, been in every kind of format imaginable, and he is a four-time all-pro professional tight end. Give it up for Tommy Auger. Tommy, thank you so much for being here, man. How's it going?
I'm doing well, Brady. Thanks for having me on. And that was an impressive intro. You got a lot of talent for that, man.
Well, thank you very. I that's usually a comment I get is like, oh, that was a lot of energy into the intro, and it's like,
That's impressive.
start off with a hard foot. So Tommy, first off, when you first ended up going into college and playing at St. John's, you're playing football and you were playing baseball.
hmm
Now, two sport athletes are not something that we see in this era of specialization. What was it like trying to balance two sports at the collegiate level?
it wasn't as hard as you might imagine because just in high school I was used to playing three sports all the time, and get my studies done. In college, obviously, is a little bit tougher, but that was one of the main reasons I wanted to go to St. John's is because I didn't have a lot of interest from Division I schools. I would have had to, try to walk on somewhere or something. So I figured, I still can continue my baseball career, continue my football career at St. John's. They got great history in both. So, the enthusiasm for wanting to play both and wanting to, be successful and take on that challenge is made the time commitment easier. And, I just have so much love for both sports that it wasn't too much of a chore, going to off-season practices for both. So that made it a lot easier.
Now, did it end up being like you realized that you had better like professional prospects in football, or is football just more the one that you're the most passionate about? What ultimately ended up, you taking one route over the other?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been better at football than baseball. I never really thought I had professional prospects, especially going into college, just because, I had a good high school career, but I didn't really get any attention from big colleges. So I mean, that's kind of the first step to even thinking about professional is, you got to get, do well in college. So that wasn't really something that ever crossed my mind. Going into college is just kind of something that I wanted to pursue after, mostly because I still felt like I could play the game at a high level. I, had a lot of success at St. John's, and our team had a lot of success. And I watching so much film, you eventually get to kind of get a good sense of where you fit amongst other guys. And I really felt like I could play at a high level, and I could stick with guys that were playing in higher leagues. So I wanted to give it a shot from there. But going into college, it wasn't really something I thought about.
Now, at St. John's, D3 in Minnesota, what I always stress, like with the people I talk to, with my following of, spring football, the ELF, all those things, is like how many guys from the JUCO through the D2 level are insanely talented, skilled players that slip through the cracks because the scouting and recruiting process is not only not perfect, it's light years away from being perfect, and plenty, so many people are examples of that. But the conference that you all played in at St. John's, the MIAC folks, it's just Minnesota D3 schools. That has got to be a robust level of competition.
I mean, it was decent. We had some really good teams in there. Bethel and St. Thomas were always really good challenges. I mean, both those teams are always ranked, in the top 20, top 10 in the country and in Division three. And St. Thomas even moved up to Division one the year after I graduated. But I mean, the rest of the teams are really talented teams. Over the course of D3 is just we had really good teams at St. John's, so we handled the rest of the conference usually pretty easily. But there were some really good teams that I think maybe if they're in a different conference, they're winning the conference year in and year out and going to the playoffs. But yeah, the MIAC top to bottom, it has some good teams. It has some teams that are not so good, but I would say overall for Division three, it's probably up there with the top two or three conferences.
In St. John's itself, a school known for, a handful of guys getting drafted over the years and finding their way onto professional teams. And so you were an AFCA All-American in 2018. And then, after your college career, you end up signing over in Austria with the Blue Devils. How, because there's so many like different ways that I hear of people arriving at these things, but like, what happens in between your college career ending and you finding a pro opportunity in Austria? What connections were made that ended up that had you even realizing that there was an opportunity there?
Yeah, well, I was actually reaching out to a bunch of teams and staying in contacts with teams that I had already talked to, and I actually before the Austria deal even happened, and I don't even know if I've said this to too many people, but I had a GFL team that I was signed with for like a month, and then they like kind of rug pulled me at the last second. I was like, oh my gosh, no way this is happening where I got finally feel like I'm gonna go do something super cool in a different country with still get to play football, and then it gets ripped out of my hands at the last second. But I had I contacted some other people after that deal fell through, and I had a former teammate that played out there for the same team and in the same league, and a St. John's coach that had coached out there maybe like I don't know how long before, maybe 10, 15, 20 years before. So he still knew, the owner of the team, and he got me in contact with them and threw a pretty quick deal together about a month or two before I was supposed to fly out, and then kind of all worked out from there.
Now, the like, I'm someone who watches the European League of Football, and every country, as American football is growing across the planet, every country obviously has stuff that like they're just not there yet. How could they be? This is a sport that's been very popular in America for over 100 years now, and it's just starting to pick up steam in a lot of other areas of the world. But you see all these different teams in the European League of Football where they have to have their homegrown players, and they end up kind of having these niches of things that their players are good at, and then some things like they're definitely not as good at, and they reach out for American talent, either receiver, running back, quarterback, or whatever it is. Austria, at least from my observations in the European League of Football, they do well on the offensive line. They grow them big there. What were your assessments in your time with the Blue Devils of the things that the Austrians are doing well in football, and the biggest areas of improvement that should be next for them to get to the next level?
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the biggest strength they have is probably strength and size. I mean, they got some really strong dudes over there, and I don't know if it's just something in the genetics of Austrians or if it's the type of guy over there that wants to go out for football, but they got some really strong players. I would say one of the things just that I notice, might be a little bit of a weakness is usually just, the depth on teams, like the number of players. Once the number of players, that are just interested in the sport and want to pursue it professionally, um, comes up, I think that that's going to do wonders for the league because a lot of those teams over there, ELF, GFL, AFL, they have some really talented players, and I just think the talent maybe falls off a little bit quicker than than you want it to. Like if you get a couple injuries or two, three injuries at a position, you might be a little bit more hurt than you normally would be, on a college team or what it might be. So I would just say, once more people catch on and start loving football and growing up playing it, and the numbers of players just goes up, I think that depth problem is probably going to be solved, and they'll have even stronger teams than they do right now, which is saying something because the level of competition over there, over the last few years especially has gone up and up. So
And it's hard because, it's not in those countries, kids don't necessarily grow up dreaming of playing American football, and, basketball, we've seen what's happened with basketball internationally over the last 30 years. But, with American football, there just hasn't been that like Olympic dream team, like to go around the world and like cause that explosion. Now, if an Italian or a Spaniard or a German dude was to come to the NFL and be like a consistent all pro, maybe that is a little bit of the spark. But I'm impressed with the progression that we have seen considering the circumstances in Europe and in a bunch of other countries, as we'll get to in a second. Now, so you then spend time in fan controlled football.
mm,
We're all FCF in that regard. I just got done watching your FCF highlights, actually. Now, that is an incredibly I have to commend the creativity of the idea, whether it ended up working long term or not. It's always a risk when you go after bigger names and get them involved, which was a big hallmark of the FCF. But I think thinking outside the box is something that more people should end up doing, even though in this instance it didn't work out in the long term. What was your experience like in fan controlled football, and was that something that was you know, that was just a good idea, but didn't, feel right in practice? Or was that a format you actually like enjoyed being a part of?
no, I thought it was a good idea, and I don't know what the financial side looked of it or why they didn't keep it around, but I thought it was a good idea. It felt like there was a lot of buzz around the league and on in the stadium and on social media, and it was a good league. There's a lot of talent in it. That's for certain. We had a lot of really good players, a lot of guys that went on to do XFL, UFL, play in a bunch of different leagues. So you really saw the that type of success translate to other leagues for guys too. Arena is something unique for tight ends because especially in FCF, we're mostly asked to block, which is totally fine with me. But it's something that in Austria, I wasn't asked to do as much of. So it was kind of, a good skill development thing for me too. Blocking every play and like you said, trying to win all FCF by just trying to prove that I'm the best blocker of the tight end. So, we caught some passes, caught some touchdowns, but just, if in fan control football, the way it worked, if you're a tight end, you're blocking 85% of the time.
And that's, I do like arena football and in the indoor football league. But I'm a big fan of the tight end position. And it's just not a format that like invites those guys or like utilize their best. If you're gonna be a tight end in those forms, you're just gonna be playing a large wide receiver. And even that isn't necessarily completely right for a lot of indoor formats. So, a lot of people at tight end, it seems, are, limited by that. But I know that like you're someone who basically like you go through your statistics in your professional career, or things that you've been asked to do or things that you've shown that you can do. You've got this like Swiss Army knife quality with your long snapping and even the few special teams experiences you have. That's something that I always felt in this era of football that it would appeal more to coaches and teams. But I find that like that just doesn't always seem to be the case. Like a few years ago, everybody wanted their Tommy Stevens or their Jalen Hurts, like that all started with Taysom Hill. But like it seems that people like the idea, but they don't end up actually ever pulling the trigger on it. as someone who has shown a versatile skill set, have you found that to be something that garners you more interest and gets you more opportunities, or are people really looking for just people who are pure specialists?
Yeah, I think it always helps, and for me, it's kind of one of those things where if I am asked to do something, and at the tight end position, you're asked to do a lot of different things, but if I'm asked to do anything, I'm going to try to do it, as best as I can. So I don't want to try to have any weaknesses or anything that I feel like, the coach doesn't feel comfortable asking me to do because I'm going to try to do it my best. But I think it always helps to have more of a skill set. More things that you can do. But it really, if you're going to be like a specialist type of guy, you got to be really, really good at that one specific thing. Because I think otherwise coaches might look at that as kind of a drawback. Because if you're a good blocker, it helps you get open, and if you're a good route runner, it helps the team run the ball because they might have to put a different personnel on the field. So I always think the versatility is always helpful.
So, in 2023, the time that you did spend trying to, be a part of the Orlando Guardians, what was it about like the XFL time that you don't think like worked out necessarily?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is us switching offensive coordinators halfway through training camp. Probably didn't help. I mean, we were running one type of offense, where I'm getting a lot of reps, and we're more like two tight ends set, fullback tight end, and felt like I was a big part of that offense, and would have got a lot of reps. And then a couple of weeks before training camp ends, we switched to a little bit more of a spread. We kept the tight ends we ended up keeping were guys that they saw more as maybe true receiving threats. And yeah, so I mean, I think the team that drafted me and had an idea for me ended up kind of changing their vision for the whole offense partway through training camp. So that probably didn't help, but yeah. So I got released on the last day before game week, which was pretty heartbreaking. But it's all happened for a reason, I figure, and I'm just trying to make the most out of it.
Well, so then after that, what ultimately connected you to Mexico?
Yeah, so right after I got back home, I got a call, or I got a message on Instagram from the quarterback that I've played down there for 3 years with, Shelton Epler, and he said, "Hey, just got released from the XFL. We're looking for a tight end. I like your film. If it's something you're interested in, let me connect you with our GM." And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to hear what he's got to say and what they've got to offer." And talked to Jose, our GM, and he sold me on the idea. Gave me a good contract and a good opportunity to compete in a great league and with a great offense. And that was just something I figured I could have either wait on my couch. Maybe an XFL team will call, maybe they won't, or I can go play and get more film and do what I love to do. Not I don't love to sit around and wait for a phone call. I love to play football. So I was biting at the opportunity to go play somewhere, especially because I had grinded so hard in the off season. I wanted to, you know, fade away. So joined the team down in Monterey, and we've had a great time down there ever since.
Do you think that some people that are in your same position sometimes get stuck waiting on a phone call that they're hoping to get as opposed to taking the next opportunity?
Yeah, I think it definitely happens. I think sometimes guys, and this thought ran through my head too, like because you can get a call when you're down there, you could just sit and wait, but some guys are probably thinking, hey, I don't want to go play in this league or that league that might be a little bit of a downgrade from the XFL, just because what if I go there and I get hurt and then I lose my opportunity that I would have had to sign with another team. So I think that's more of it. Isn't guys are just they don't want to. You're always kind of balancing between, do I go play and risk maybe getting hurt, or do I just sit and wait around and maybe risk, not getting a phone call and not playing this season? And it's a tough decision to make. I'm always gonna, me personally, I'm always gonna, fall towards the side of playing.
Well, I mean, that's worked out tremendously well for you. Like you've always been on a team. You've always played well for that team, dating back to, your time in Austria. Like, so when you agree to go down and play for a team in Mexico, what kind of these are aspects that fascinate me. What do you do as far as like your living arrangements for the season? Like you go and like you does the team have sort of like hey, give this person a call, they'll like tell you where you can like rent a place to stay for a period of time, like something like that. Like how do you arrange your life to then go down and live in Monterey, for that period of time?
Yeah, the team does a really good job. They have everything set up for us when we get there. So, in my case, I live in a house with three other players on the team, and there's an apartment building that the team has where each guy's got their own room in that. So the team sets it all up. They basically say, "Hey, show up and worry about football, and we'll take care of the rest." And that's you know Monterey is a really, really well-run organization. Uh, I don't know if that's the case for every team, in the ELF, the LFA, all that stuff, but I can vouch for Monterey. They're ran really well and they do things the right way.
Have you liked living in all the places that you've played so far?
Yeah, it's been a really good experience. Just to kind of I'm an adventurer anyways. I love to go see new places, experience different different parts of the world. So it's been really cool. I've loved Austria. I love Monterrey, Mexico, and hopefully I'll feel the same way about Japan. I'm excited for that as well, and getting to experience that.
Well, so in your time in Mexico, one, multiple time LFA All Pro, you set several single season records across the board for tight ends down in that league. That's years of tremendous success that you put in the Mexican league. And watching the highlight tape, the things that jump out to me, one, I love the vibrant colors and the kind of like offbeat logos and mascots that some of those teams are rocking. Like it's definitely a different flavor. But also the crowds at some of those games are phenomenal. Like it really like puts some, other more prominent alternative pro football crowds to shame. So, one, what did you find the quality of play to be in the LFA? And then, what was it like actually playing in front of those crowds? Because it seems like they were there in numbers and they were, had the quite the appropriate amount of intensity.
Yeah, first I agree that I love the logos in the LFA, and that's like not the first time I've heard that. I've heard it's just a different vibe, and that they're really cool and unique, and they're not just like how some high school logos are where it's like copy and paste of an NFL team. They're really unique. They're their own thing, and it's really cool. For the level of play, it's very high. I mean, they if you look at a lot of international league, the limit on American players is usually around four on a team, or in Canada it's even 20 on a team. You can have American players. In Mexico it's 16. So we have a lot of guys who have played high level football in America, high level college, CFL, NFL, XFL, all mixed in there. And then the Mexican national players are also very, very good. Probably some of the best national players anywhere outside the U.S. Maybe just behind the U.S. and Canada in the world. They've got really good college football down there. Monterrey's got two of the best college teams. So, we get the benefit of, having some of the best Mexican players right in our backyard there. So, I mean, the football there is as high of a level as I've played anywhere. And the level of players on an individual basis is great as well. And also, like you said, the crowds down there are incredible. The Mexican fans are electric. It is really, if they, especially for a big game, they don't stay quiet for you know a second the whole game. They're always cheering, they're always on their feet, and I think Monterey probably once again has top of the league or close to the top of the league in terms of attendance, and the fans are just incredible everywhere we go there.
That's crazy. But like, I get it. We've always known that Mexico had a strong base of American football fans. Like the NFL, the NBA, they've been flirting with taking a team to Mexico City for years now, because of the popularity of that there. That makes sense. That kids would actually grow up in Mexico, like actually wanting to play American football. Maybe it's not as much competition with soccer as you see in Europe and some of those other places. Um,
I mean, and two, just one other thing, like I think it's got a great base right now. I think it's got a lot of room for growth because they have a youth league in Monterey called the Monterey Football League. It's just like Pee Wee football, and there's probably like 35, 40 teams in Monterey or clubs, and they got levels of 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, all the way down. I was extremely surprised by the number of youth players they have down there. So I don't know if that's something that's been that way for the last 10 years, or if it's just like that the last 3 or 4 years that I've been there, that it's been growing. But the number of clubs and the number of youth players playing both tackle and flag is way more than I expected.
Well, there you go. I mean, if that exists and that has a support system, then there's no reason that like Mexican football should not continue to grow, exponentially, because, it takes time for a country to get its foothold on a new sport, basically, or a sport that they just historically have just not played a ton of. But
Mm-hmm.
once you break a certain barrier, then, if you have a strong base, you have everything you need to grow. Um, Now, just a few weeks ago, it was like formally announced that you had signed with IBM Big Blue of the X League in Japan. Now, I've talked to some other players that have like signed with X League teams or have at least been in talks about that. The X League, again, another league that continues to grow in prominence. I think Japan seems to be pretty much good at everything that they set their mind to. And if they set their mind on American football, I'm not surprised that they end up being good at it. What was the fan experience like there? Because what am I talking about, man? That's coming. Um, that's coming up. But I would
Yeah.
imagine that the fan experience might be a little bit different because just knowing the differences in fans, in mixed martial arts, MMA fans in America, constantly loud, constantly yelling. Japanese fans are known to be a little bit more like reserved and observant, So I wonder how that translates to football.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it as well. One thing, just because I fly out on Thursday, so I haven't arrived yet, but I've been in Zoom meetings with the team and studying the playbook with both the quarterback and the offense coordinator. And one thing I think kind of fits into Japanese culture and football together is the playbook is very extensive. Like there's every concept you could pretty much think of, they're ready for. So I'm impressed with the playbook first of all, and I'm excited to get out there and see, just like you said, like how the game day experience is with the fans, and if it's a different vibe or I watched a lot of their film too, and they played hard, they play disciplined football. So it'll definitely be a little bit different of an experience, but I'm excited to see in which ways it's different.
So are you like traveling to Japan like cold, basically? Like, not having been there before, like that has got to be, the biggest cultural shift that you're going to be seeing in your professional career so far.
Yeah, probably. I don't know much of the language. I've been studying for 3 weeks, but that doesn't get me too far when all the characters are different. Um, yeah, it's gonna definitely be a different experience, but yeah, I am kind of going in cold to the whole thing. So hopefully the guys can teach me a thing or two over there about what I need to be doing, and what the kind of the rules are, in public and all that stuff. So I just gotta get used to that stuff in the first couple weeks or whatever it might be, and then enjoy my time over there and hopefully win a lot of football games.
It's got to get easier and easier for you every time you go play in another new country. Like that's got to be like quite a shock to somebody who has never done that before. But at this point, once you've handled playing in Japan, it seems like you could pretty much go to Madagascar and play pro football like on a dime if you needed to.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if they might have to start up a league in Madagascar. But I mean, for me, it's always easier when I get to bring my wife along, and she's coming along to Japan, so it'll be a really cool experience. When I'm down in Mexico, she comes back, to the United States, goes back down to Mexico, comes back to the United States, and that's a good system. But I prefer to have her there all the time with me. That makes the traveling experience easier. It makes the life experience over there easier. Just not being separated. So I'm that'll play a big factor, and I'm sure that'll make the transition a lot smoother.
And one final point is like you might have as you go to all these different leagues and teams and find success, you might have a point where you like really want to get to like want to get signed by that team, that place, that team, that place, work through the different leagues and whatnot. But like at the end of the day, it's got to be super cool that the thing that you are really good at and have been doing your whole life has taken you and now your family to all of these different places.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, I feel like a little bit like it's like a dream. I'm getting to combine two things that I've wanted to do my whole life, which is, see the world and play football, and combine that into, um, one thing that also helps pay the bills and that deal. So I'm pretty lucky and blessed that I, have gotten these opportunities that I have and made the most of them, and, continue to continue to see new places and play football at a high level.
And Tommy, for any of your fans, for any Japanese football fans that might have happened upon this podcast, what can people expect to see from you in the upcoming season in the X League?
Hopefully you just see a guy that's playing hard every snap, and playing the game the right way, and I'm gonna do what I can to make plays for our team, help us win in any way I can, and hopefully be in the end zone a lot, and helping the Big Blue run up the scoreboard a bit.
Folks, thank you so much for listening to another interlude episode of RotoBallers official MMA podcast. Tap that again. Follow me on Twitter at RotoBrady for all things combat sports and the like. UFC 319 coming up this weekend. Come to the RotoBaller MMA Discord. Look out for all my other MMA content that's coming out this week. As always, with me tonight has been Tommy Auger. You can follow him on Twitter at TommyAuger39. I'll let him do the Instagram part too. But Tommy, thank you so much for being here tonight. This has been very fun and illuminating. If there's anything or anybody you want to shout out or anything you want to say, the floor is yours.
Yeah, shout out my mom. It's her birthday today. And thanks for having me on, Brady. I had a lot of fun, man. Anytime you want me back on, just feel free to hit me up. So I really appreciate the invite on the show here.
Oh, absolutely, man. This is some of the most fun stuff that I ever get to do is talking to people that, are going through, the world of professional sports and so many different paths. And yours is one of the more unique ones for sure. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Have yourselves a great week. Tune in to hear my UFC 319 picks later this week, and peace.